the next adventure that I went on that I need to tell you, the final adventure, it was the day before it was like 2 days before I was going to leave. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking like, okay, I've got 2 days left. What do I want to do on my last 2 days while I'm here?
Yeah.
And I started thinking and I realized, I'm probably not going to be in England again this year. Like,
yeah,
you never know, but I really don't think so. One of my goals for the year is to visit a George Orwell site.
Yeah.
I should probably do that. Like, while I'm here, I've got 2 more days. Yeah. I should probably do that. And I start looking into it to be like, I have visited some. Like, he has a famous statue outside of the BBC, and he has he lived in a lot of different places, not for very long, but like there's plaques all over London, and I've been there. There's not much to do. You just like go to the building and you see the plaque, and it's like George Orwell lived here for 6 months, and you're like, awesome. Cool. All right. You just keep walking. So I was like, I'd like to visit something a little more substantial than that. But if worse comes to worse, that will count. I'll go to a couple new ones that I haven't been to. I start doing some research. And I realized I come to learn, the place where he lived for the longest stretch of time, which was in some ways 4 years, in some ways 8 years, but basically was this cottage an hour outside of London.
Okay.
He rented out this cottage, partly because he wanted to write more in silence, partly because he was getting sick, because if you don't know, he died of tuberculosis. Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. Partly because he was getting sick, partly because he wanted to get married. Like, there's all these reasons why he decided to kind of live outside of London. And he found this cottage that actually his friends found for him. And the first time, like, he paid for it, the first time he showed up, he'd never seen it. And I was like, relatable, Mr. George Orwell. I myself have done that move. I myself have moved into the country without seeing the house. Mm-hmm. But anyways, he rented this cottage in this little town called Wallington. Not even a town. Barely a village. It's like it's a road. Okay. It's like a place where 2 roads meet. And I thought, okay, what would I do if I went there? So there's his cottage, which it belongs to a person. Like, it's someone else lives there now. Yeah. So you can't visit it. You can't go inside of it or anything. But I was like, okay, but still, it'd be very cool to get to see it. Around the corner is the church where he got married. Ooh. And I was like, okay, well, now we're talking about a trip. Yeah. And then just around the corner from that, and this, I didn't know this, just around the corner from that is Manor Farm. There is a farm literally called Manor Farm, which if you've read Animal Farm, dear listener, you're thinking, that's the name of the farm in Animal Farm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I had no idea that there was actually a farm called Manor Farm near where he lived.
Do you think they named it that because of him or vice versa?
No, I looked it up because I thought the same thing. Yeah. I thought to myself, well, maybe this is not a cash grab because they can't make money, but maybe they're like, haha, Orwell lived here, we're going to name it Manor Farm. It's like a pretty famous farm, I guess. Like, it's been a farm for 100 years before he lived there. And the town is called Wallington, and the one of the towns in the book is called Willingdon. So I was like, minute. He's doing the same thing that authors all over do, like with Lucy Maud Montgomery. So much of the towns are like thinly veiled other towns that actually existed. I was like, this is amazing. I've got to go. I was like, how do I get there? And so I found out you just take a train north. And you get off at a little town called, what is it called? Baldic? Something like that. And it was so funny, Raylene. I was like, okay, so I get off at this town, and then it's only a 10-minute drive to this village. But it's also like an hour and a half walk kind of a thing. Because it's out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, hopefully there's Ubers there. Like, I don't have a car. I'm not going to rent a car for this whole adventure. I'm like, it'll probably work out. So I get on the train the next day. Mm-hmm. It's the last day of my England trip. It's raining as well. I don't have an umbrella. I'm like, screw it. Who cares? I'm on an Orwell adventure. I don't need my hair to not be frizzy. Mm-hmm. That's okay. So I get on the train, ride it to this village, to this town, get off the train. First mistake. I didn't use the washroom on the train.
Oh, bad.
And I get off at thinking there will be a washroom at the train station. And I see like a lady that works at the train station. I'm like, hi, where's the washroom? And she's like, on the train. I was like, oh, is there another washroom nearby? She's like, maybe in town. I was like, okay. So I start walking into town. Now, it's like literally a 5-minute walk to a little cafe. Perfect. I use their washroom. I buy an orange juice because I feel like when you use someone's washroom, you need to buy something. So I just bought an orange juice. I freaked out. I was like, orange juice. And then I ordered an Uber and this man pulled up. Oh, and I was like, is it really this easy? Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So I get in the Uber and he this is so funny. I just, like, you know, when you're doing an Uber, you put in the address where you want them to drop you off. And I just put in George Orwell's address. And I was like, I'm just going to be dropped off in front of George Orwell's house.
Like an Uber to George Orwell's house.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the number 2 Kits Lane. I was like, all right. So, and that's exactly what happened. We just went on these random little country roads. He dropped me off in front of someone's house. And I was like, thanks. He was like, bye. And he left. And there I was. And I was like, I almost couldn't believe how easy it had been. When I got off the train, I literally, Raylene, I laughed. I stepped onto the station and I looked around and I just started laughing because I was like, where am I?
How did I get here?
What am I doing? And what do I do next? I don't know. I just got to figure out how to get there, you know? So anyways, I get to the house. It's a beautiful little cottage. I took lots of photos and clips that we'll show here on the YouTube, but I'll also put on the Instagram and stuff. I took my nice camera because I was like, this will be fun. It's a little day trip. So I saw the house, absolutely beautiful. I really didn't want to spend a lot of time there because, as I said, people live in the house. Yeah. So I just kind of looked at it for a minute, not for very long, and I took a selfie in front of it and making sure to not capture anybody or any, like, you can't see in the windows or their car or anything. I was just like respectful. And also there's a big plaque on it that says like George Orwell lived here. So I'm like, they obviously knew that when they moved in, people would be visiting it, but also I didn't want to overstay my welcome. So I was just there for a moment, but then I walked on and I walked to the farm and it was so surreal. It was so surreal because, Raylene, this is not a tourist destination. It was a very different experience to the one I'd had just like 2 weeks before when I went to the Bronte Parsonage, because the Bronte Parsonage is a historic home that has been, you know, adopted by a museum or made into a museum. They've made an extension with nice bathrooms and a big gift shop, and a dozen employees work there to maintain the history and tell the stories of what happened. And there's lots of tourists in the town. Like, it's like, you know, you're there and and we're all there for this thing. Yeah. This was, like I said, a street in the middle of England in a very sleepy little residential village. There was no one else there. Amazing. And it was raining. So there was like, I got soaked. There was no one else there. Yeah. And in that way, though, it was a really beautiful, intimate experience. Like, it was just me walking around the same lanes that Orwell walked around it. And I got to literally trace the walk he did when he got married. Like, it's in a diary or in a letter where he was like, we got married at the church and then we walked back down to the house. And I'm just like, I'm doing the walk. I'm seeing what he saw. And, you know, there's like the duck pond there that he mentioned. It's right there. And and there's a building next to his house was a pub, which is now a residential house. Wow. But like, I'm like, so that's where they had their lunch after they got married. And then they walked 3 steps over to their own home. Cool. It was such a beautiful visit. And it was very grounding in that way where I was like, I see why Orwell wrote Animal Farm. He lived in farm country. Anyway, so I went to Manor Farm, which is a working farm. Yeah. And I just kind of stood outside but it was so cool because there is a sign that says Manor Farm on a black barn. It's black. Oh my gosh. All the buildings were black and very ominous, and I was there on a rainy gray day. That's perfect. And I was just like, this is so scary. I'm like, Napoleon is around the corner, I swear to God. It was fantastic. And then I walked up to the church. And the church was really a very beautiful church. It was completely empty, and I was so grateful to them for leaving the door open. It's like a real hit or miss situation with churches. Some places lock up, obviously, if no one's there, and some churches leave their doors open for anyone to come in during the day, and I was so glad that it was open. And I probably was there for 20 minutes by myself, and I just got to sit down, take a break. I was so grateful to the church because they had these panels all about George Orwell and his life in Wallington. I read all the panels, and I bought these 2 little pamphlets that they had on just a table. They had like pamphlets in like a little money box and whatever, and you just drop in some pounds for them. So this one's called Orwell's Life in Wallington, George Orwell in Wallington. These 2 little pamphlets about here. You can see what the manor farm looks like. Yeah, it's quite creepy. But also there's this fantastic photo of Orwell and his goat, Ariel. And that is from the, that photo is taken on the land right in front of his house that he also rented to have some, so that he could have the goat and some chickens. And so I visited the church. It was really, really beautiful. Got my little pamphlets, took a break. Thankfully, the worst of the rain passed while I was in the church. And then I walked back down to the house because on that little like corner where there's like 2 streets that meet kind of thing, there's the village hall and there's like a little shelter with a bench, like, kind of like a bus stop, but made out of wood and very cute. And so I sat there and I ordered the Uber. I was like, well, I've done it. I visited 3 Orwell sites in one little spot. I've had a beautiful hour in the countryside in England. It's time for me to go home. And so I sat on this little bench and I ordered the Uber. It was the same guy that dropped me off an hour ago, which was so funny. He had like an Eastern European accent. And I opened the door. I was like, hello again. And he was like, hello. He's like, it's a small world.
No kidding.
It was so cute. And and then he took me back to the town. I got back on the train and I was back in London in a couple of hours. So beautiful. The whole thing was a really beautiful experience. I had so much fun. And I've ticked one of my New Year's resolutions off to visit a new Orwell site.
And it was
so I feel arguably
maybe the best one you could have done.
I really agree.
Like his house and the church and the farm.
Literally like all in one.
Yeah.
The other big one that I do recommend Orwell people do is visit his grave, which I did a long time ago. It's beautiful there. So beautiful.